The morning Quinn Gallagher opened that telegram from Kansas City. He never imagined his life would change completely before the week ended. He stood in the dusty yard of his ranch outside Fargo, Dakota Territory, squinting at the words that promised him salvation in the form of a woman he had never laid eyes on. The drought of 1883 had been merciless, and his cattle operation was barely surviving. When his lawyer cousin Matthew had written about a widow woman with a prime 160 acres of homestead land adjacent to his property, Quinn had seen it as a business arrangement, pure and simple. The woman needed a husband to maintain her claim under the law. He needed that land and its water rights. Simple mathematics. "Boss, you really going through with this?" Hank, his foreman, asked from the porch of the main house. The older man had been with Quinn since his father died 5 years ago, leaving Quinn the ranch at 23. "Got no choice," Quinn said, folding the telegram. "She arrives on the afternoon train tomorrow. We will sign the papers at the courthouse, and that water access will keep our herd from dying out." Hank shook his head slowly. "Marrying a stranger for land. Your daddy would have had words about that." "My daddy also would have sold off this ranch before letting it fail," Quinn replied, his jaw set firm. "Sometimes a man does what needs doing." He spent the rest of that day trying not to think about it too much. At 28 years old, he had imagined marriage differently. There had been Sarah Millhouse 3 years back, but she had chosen a banker from Bismarck who could give her a painted house in town and Sunday socials. Quinn had buried himself in ranch work after that, telling himself he was better off alone. Now he was getting a wife anyway, but one who wanted his name and protection, not his heart. It seemed safer that way. The next afternoon found him standing on the platform of the Fargo train station, hat in hand, watching the locomotive approach through shimmering heat waves. His hands were sweating despite the dry air. He had scrubbed himself clean, put on his best shirt and vest, and even let Hank trim his dark hair that morning. He felt ridiculous. "What if she is awful?" he had asked Hank that morning. "What if you are awful?" Hank had replied with a rare grin. The train screeched to a halt, releasing clouds of steam and smoke. Passengers began disembarking. Quinn watched families reuniting, businessmen striding past with leather cases, cowboys heading for the saloons. Then he saw her. She stepped down from the passenger car with one small carpet bag, and Quinn felt something in his chest constrict so suddenly he forgot to breathe. The telegram had said her name was Lydia Remington, widow of Herbert Remington, age 25. It had not mentioned that she would have auburn hair that caught the sunlight like copper wire, or that her face would be the kind that made a man forget his own name. She stood on the platform looking lost, her green traveling dress dusty from the journey, and when her eyes met his across the crowd, Quinn Gallagher felt his heart stop completely and then restart at double speed. He walked toward her on legs that suddenly felt unsteady. "Mrs. Remington." She nodded, studying him with eyes the color of honey. "Mr. Gallagher." "Yes, madam." He took her bag, finding it lighter than expected. "Is this all?" "I shipped a trunk ahead. It should arrive next week." Her voice was soft but clear, with an Eastern accent that spoke of education. "I did not have much to bring. The wagon is this way." He led her through the crowd, hyper-aware of her presence beside him. She was tall for a woman, coming up past his shoulder, and she moved with an unusual grace despite obvious fatigue. They reached his wagon and he helped her up, his hands on her waist for just a moment. Even through the layers of fabric, he felt the warmth of her and had to force himself to let go. The ride back to the ranch started in uncomfortable silence. Quinn kept stealing glances at her profile while pretending to watch the road. Finally, she spoke. Your lawyer was not specific about the details of the arrangement, Lydia said carefully. I want to make certain we understand each other. The marriage will be legal and binding, Quinn said, keeping his voice steady. You will keep your property rights to your homestead. I will pay to have the paperwork filed and protected. In exchange, I gain water access for my cattle. And the marriage itself, she did not look at him. Quinn swallowed hard. I assumed separate rooms. You will have your privacy. This is business. Business, she repeated quietly. Something flickered across her face, but it was gone before he could read it. Yes, that seemed sensible, but nothing about his reaction to her felt sensible. His heart was still pounding, his palms still sweating. When the ranch house came into view, he watched her face anxiously. It is smaller than I expected, she said, but her tone was not critical. It looks sturdy. Built it with my father when I was 17, Quinn said. It will keep out the weather and the cold. The roof does not leak. Hank came out to meet them, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile when he saw Lydia. Madam, welcome. I am Hank Miller, the foreman here. Lydia Remington, she said, accepting his help down from the wagon. I am pleased to meet you. I will get your bag to your room, Hank said, grabbing the carpet bag before Quinn could protest. We set up the guest room for you, madam. It has a good bed and a window facing east. Gets nice morning light. Quinn led her inside, seeing his home through her eyes. The main room held a stone fireplace, a worn sofa his mother had brought from Illinois, a rough table with 4 chairs. It was clean but sparse, a bachelor home. I will show you your room, he said awkwardly. We eat supper at 6. Hank does most of the cooking, though I manage. She followed him down the short hallway. He opened the door to the guest room, which Hank had clearly worked hard to prepare. Fresh curtains hung at the window. A quilt his mother had made covered the bed. A small table held a basin and pitcher. It is perfect, Lydia said softly, stepping inside. She touched the quilt gently. Thank you. We will go to the courthouse tomorrow morning to make it official, Quinn said from the doorway. Unless you need time to rest first. Tomorrow is fine. She turned to face him, and again that jolt went through him at the sight of her face. Mr. Gallagher, I want to be clear. I am grateful for this arrangement. My husband died 8 months ago, leaving me with the homestead but little else. The law requires I either remarry or give up the claim. I worked too hard on that land to lose it. I understand, Quinn said, though he was wondering what kind of fool her first husband had been to leave such a woman alone. This serves us both. That night at supper, Quinn could barely taste the beef stew Hank had prepared. He was too aware of Lydia sitting across from him, eating with small, precise bites, answering Hank's friendly questions about her journey. How long were you married, if you do not mind my asking? Hank said. 3 years, Lydia replied. Herbert was older than me. He had always wanted to homestead. We came out from Pennsylvania 2 years ago and filed our claim. That must have been hard work for a young lady, Hank observed. It was, she said simply. But I learned. I can shoot, plow, and mend fence. I kept chickens and a garden. When Herbert got sick last winter, I managed alone for 2 months before he passed. Quinn felt a surge of respect. She was not some delicate city flower, but a woman who knew how to survive. What happened to your livestock and equipment? I sold the oxen to pay for Herbert's burial and the lawyer fees, she said. The chickens and my horse remain. The plow and tools are still there. I hired the mason boy to check on things twice weekly. We can bring your horse here, Quinn offered, and anything else you need. Thank you. She met his eyes again, and he felt that same breathless feeling. After supper, she excused herself to her room. Quinn sat on the porch with Hank, smoking and watching the stars emerge. She is not what you expected, Hank said after a while. No, Quinn admitted. She is beautiful. That is not relevant to the arrangement. Hank laughed quietly. Boy, I saw your face at that train station. You looked like you had been kicked by a mule. Quinn did not respond because it was true. He had spent the entire day planning to treat this as pure business, and then Lydia Remington had stepped off that train and demolished every rational thought in his head. Just be careful, Hank said more seriously. She is grieving her husband. Don't push for more than she can give. I am not pushing for anything, Quinn said firmly. This is what she wants, a business arrangement. But lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, he could not stop thinking about honey-colored eyes and copper hair. He could not stop wondering what her smile looked like, because she had not smiled once since arriving. Most of all, he could not stop thinking that tomorrow he would marry this woman, but she would never truly be his. The courthouse in Fargo was busy the next morning with land claims and legal disputes. Judge Thornton, a stern man with gray whiskers, looked over their paperwork with narrowed eyes. This is legal but unusual, he said. Mrs. Remington, you are certain about this marriage? Yes, Your Honor, Lydia said calmly. She wore a simple blue dress and had pinned her hair up, revealing the elegant line of her neck. Quinn forced himself to look away. Mr. Gallagher, you understand that this marriage gives you no automatic claim to her homestead property? Yes, Your Honor. The water rights agreement is separate and documented. Very well. The judge pulled out the marriage certificate. Do you have witnesses? Hank and the county clerk stood as witnesses. The ceremony was brief and formal. Quinn heard himself saying, I do, and heard Lydia's soft voice repeating the same words. Then the judge pronounced them man and wife. You may kiss your bride, Judge Thornton said. Quinn froze. They had not discussed this. He looked at Lydia and saw uncertainty flicker across her face. Then she leaned up and brushed her lips against his cheek, so quickly and lightly he might have imagined it, but he felt that brief touch like lightning through his whole body. They signed the papers. Hank clapped him on the shoulder. The clerk congratulated them with professional cheer. Then they walked out into the bright Dakota morning as husband and wife. I need to go to the bank, Lydia said as they reached the wagon. I want to ensure my accounts are updated with my new name. I will come with you, Quinn offered. Inside the Fargo Cattleman's Bank, the clerk was a young man named Timothy who clearly knew Lydia. Mrs. Remington, he said with a warm smile that made Quinn's jaw tighten. How good to see you. It is Mrs. Gallagher now, Lydia said quietly. I was married this morning. Timothy's face fell comically. Oh, I see. Congratulations. Quinn felt a petty satisfaction watching the younger man's disappointment. After they finished the banking business, they walked back outside. He was sweet on you, Quinn said before he could stop himself. Lydia glanced at him. Timothy is 20 years old and works in a bank. He will recover. How long have you been in Fargo? Nearly 2 years. Long enough to know most people. She paused. Herbert was not well liked. He had a temper and drank too much. People pitied me but did not help when he died. Except your cousin Matthew, who suggested this arrangement. Quinn absorbed this information, angry at a dead man he had never met. Did he hurt you? She did not answer immediately. They had reached the wagon and Quinn helped her up before climbing up himself. Finally, as he took the reins, she spoke, not in ways that leave bruises. Those quiet words made Quinn want to dig up Herbert Remington and kill him again. He said nothing, but made a silent promise that this woman would never suffer that way in his house. They stopped at the general store for supplies. Lydia moved through the aisles with a practiced eye, selecting flour, sugar, coffee, and other necessities. I can cook, she told Quinn. You do not need to rely on Hank. He enjoys it, Quinn said, but I am sure he would appreciate help. At the counter, Mrs. Henderson, the store owner's wife, gave Lydia a sharp look. I heard you got married today. Quick work. We met through family connections, Lydia said evenly. It seemed practical. Practical, Mrs. Henderson repeated with a sniff. Well, congratulations, I suppose. Outside, loading the supplies into the wagon, Lydia was quiet. Do not mind her, Quinn said. She gossips about everyone. People will talk, Lydia said. A widow remarrying so soon to a stranger, they will assume the worst. Let them assume what they want, Quinn said firmly. You have nothing to be ashamed of. She looked at him with surprise, and for the first time he saw the beginning of a smile touch her lips. It transformed her face, making her even more beautiful, and Quinn had to grip the wagon rail to steady himself. The ride back to the ranch was more comfortable than the previous day. Lydia asked questions about the land, the cattle, the water situation. Quinn found himself talking more than usual, explaining the drought, his plans for the herd, the hopes he had for combining their properties. Your homestead has the creek running through it, he said. That water is worth more than gold right now. Herbert chose the land for that reason, she said. Though he never managed to make full use of it, he was better at planning than doing. What about you? I am better at doing, she said simply. When they arrived home, Lydia immediately set about putting away the supplies and starting preparations for supper. She moved through the kitchen with confidence, and Quinn found himself watching her from the doorway until Hank elbowed him. Go check the south fence like you planned, Hank said quietly. Give her some space. Quinn nodded and headed out, but his mind stayed in that kitchen with his wife. His wife. The word felt strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. He spent the afternoon riding the fence line, making repairs where the dry weather had loosened posts. The physical work helped clear his head. This was a business arrangement. Lydia had been clear about that. The fact that he found her beautiful was irrelevant. The fact that his heart raced when she was near was something he would have to manage. When he returned at sunset, the smell of cooking met him at the door. Lydia had made chicken with gravy, biscuits, and stewed vegetables from the root cellar. It was the best meal Quinn had eaten in months. This is wonderful, Hank said enthusiastically. Madam, you are a fine cook. Thank you, Lydia said. A faint color touched her cheeks at the praise. My mother used to make biscuits like this, Quinn said. The memory was bittersweet. His mother had died when he was 19, taken by fever. I would like to hear about your family, Lydia said, if you do not mind sharing. So Quinn found himself talking about his parents, their journey from Illinois, the early days of the ranch. Lydia listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she understood the hardships of frontier life. What about your family? Quinn asked. Do you have people back east? Her expression closed slightly. My parents died when I was 16. I had an aunt who took me in, but she passed 2 years later. That is when I met Herbert. He offered marriage and a fresh start. I was 18 and alone. It seemed like the right choice at the time. Quinn heard what she did not say, that she had been young and desperate, and Herbert Remington had taken advantage of that. His jaw tightened, but he kept his voice gentle. You have people now. Hank and me. This is your home. She looked at him with those honey eyes, and he saw surprise and something else he could not quite name. Thank you. That night, lying in his bed while Lydia slept in the room down the hall, Quinn thought about a girl of 18 with no family, marrying a man twice her age just to survive. He thought about her working that homestead alone, nursing a difficult husband, then managing by herself for 2 months while he died. She had backbone and strength most men would envy, and she was sleeping just a few rooms away, his wife in name but not in truth. He barely slept. The next few days fell into a routine. Quinn and Hank worked the ranch while Lydia took over the household. She cleaned, cooked, mended clothes, and tended the vegetable garden that had been badly neglected. The house began to feel like a home instead of a place where men simply slept between work shifts. On the fourth day, Quinn suggested they ride out to see her homestead. Lydia's face lit up with the first real enthusiasm he had seen from her. "I would like that very much," she said. They saddled horses, Lydia mounting with easy grace that spoke of experience. She wore split riding skirts and a wide-brimmed hat, practical clothes that Herbert had probably hated but which suited her perfectly. The ride took an hour across rolling prairie land. Quinn's cattle dotted the landscape, thin from the drought but surviving. Finally, they crested a rise and Lydia pointed ahead. "There," she said. He saw a small cabin near a stand of cottonwood trees. The creek she had mentioned ran clear and bright through the property. Even in the drought, it flowed steadily. Quinn felt his pulse quicken at the sight of that water. As they rode closer, he saw that the cabin was well maintained. The fence around the small garden was straight and strong. A chicken coop stood near the house, and several hens scratched in the dirt. A milk cow grazed in a small paddock. "You did all this?" Quinn asked, impressed. "Most of it," Lydia said. "Herbert built the cabin before he got sick, but everything else was my doing. The fence, the coop, the garden." They dismounted and Lydia showed him around. The inside of the cabin was tiny but immaculate. A bed, a table, a small stove. Personal items were still scattered about, frozen in the moment she had left for Kansas City to arrange this marriage. "We should bring your things to the ranch," Quinn said. "No sense leaving them here." "I want to keep the cabin maintained," Lydia said firmly. "This is my land, my claim. I worked too hard for it to let it fall apart." "I understand," Quinn said, respecting her pride. "We can ride out regularly to check on it, maybe even get some of my cattle moved closer to this water source." They walked down to the creek together. The water was cool and clear, running over smooth stones. Lydia knelt and trailed her fingers through it. "Herbert and I arrived here in the spring," she said softly. The creek was running high with snowmelt. "I thought it was the most beautiful place I had ever seen. For a few weeks I believed we could be happy here." "What changed?" Quinn asked, sitting on a rock nearby. "Reality," she said simply. "Herbert was not suited to homesteading. He hated the work, the isolation, the hardship. He drank to forget where he was. The angrier he got at himself, the meaner he became to me." "I am sorry," Quinn said quietly. "Don't be. I survived. And now I have my land and a marriage that will not break me." She looked up at him. "You have been kind, Quinn, kinder than I expected." It was the first time she had used his given name, and the sound of it in her voice did strange things to his heart. "We are partners in this," he said. "I want you to be happy here." "Happy," she repeated, as if testing the word. "I am not sure I remember what that feels like." Quinn wanted to promise he would teach her, wanted to say things that had no place in a business arrangement. Instead, he stood and offered his hand to help her up. When she took it, her hand was small and work roughened in his, and he held it perhaps a moment longer than necessary. On the ride back, Lydia was more talkative, pointing out features of the land, discussing where cattle could graze, where they might plant hay for winter fodder. She had a practical mind and understood ranching better than many men Quinn knew. "Did Herbert teach you about livestock?" he asked. "I taught myself," she said, "from books and from watching our neighbors before they stopped speaking to us. Herbert was useless with animals. He was a clerk back in Pennsylvania. He only came west because his brother wrote letters about easy land and opportunity. His brother is out here." "Was," Lydia corrected. "Thomas died of cholera the summer before we arrived. Herbert was too proud to turn back, even though he had no idea what he was doing." They arrived back at the ranch as the sun was setting. Hank had supper waiting and they ate together, discussing plans for moving part of the herd closer to Lydia's creek. "We will need to build some shelter for the men," Hank said. "Can't expect them to ride back and forth every day." "There is space near the cottonwoods," Lydia suggested. "Good shade in summer, windbreak in winter." "I can draw up plans," Quinn said. "Maybe start construction next week." After supper, Lydia excused herself to her room. Quinn and Hank sat on the porch as usual, but tonight Quinn's mind was too full to enjoy the quiet. "You are falling for her," Hank observed. "That was not part of the arrangement," Quinn said. "Hearts don't care much about arrangements. She just got out of a bad marriage. The last thing she needs is me pushing unwanted attention on her." "Maybe," Hank said. "Or maybe she needs to know what it feels like to be properly cared for. Just don't wait too long to tell her the truth, Quinn. Secrets have a way of festering." Quinn went to bed with those words circling his mind. He was lying to Lydia in a way. She thought this was pure business for him, that he felt nothing beyond a partnership. But the truth was, he was falling harder every day. The way she hummed while cooking, the competent way she handled tools and animals, the quiet strength she showed in everything she did. And yes, the beauty that struck him breathless every time he looked at her, but she had been clear about her expectations. She wanted safety and security, not romance. He would respect that, no matter what it cost him. The next morning, Quinn was saddling his horse when Lydia came out dressed for riding. "I am coming with you today," she announced. "The work is hard," Quinn said carefully. "I am not delicate," she replied, "and I want to learn your operation. This is my investment too." She had a point. Quinn nodded. "All right, but it will be a long day." She rode alongside him and Hank out to the grazing lands where the cattle were spread thin searching for grass. The drought had been brutal, and Quinn pointed out the areas where the grass had died completely. "When we get access to your water, we can rotate grazing," he explained. "Keep the cattle closer to moisture, let the far sections recover." "How many head do you run?" Lydia asked. 500, give or take. Lost about 50 to the drought already." "And the market?" "Prices are good if we can get them to rail in good condition. That is the gamble every year." They spent the day checking cattle, looking for signs of disease or injury. Lydia proved herself capable with a rope and fearless around the animals. By afternoon, Quinn noticed Hank watching her with approval. "She is a natural," Hank told Quinn quietly while Lydia was examining a cow's injured leg. "You got lucky, boss." Lucky did not begin to cover it, Quinn thought. That evening they returned dusty and tired. Lydia looked exhausted but satisfied. "I have not done real work in months," she said, washing up at the pump. "It feels good." "You can come out anytime," Quinn said. "An extra pair of hands is always useful." Over the next 2 weeks, Lydia became a regular part of the ranch work. She was up before dawn, helping with breakfast, then riding out with Quinn and Hank. In the evenings, she managed the house with efficiency that amazed them both. She seemed to need constant activity, as if stillness gave her too much time to think. Quinn watched her carefully, seeing the shadows that sometimes crossed her face, the way she flinched at sudden loud noises, the stiffness that came over her if he moved too quickly in her presence. These were marks Herbert had left on her, invisible but deep. He made himself move slowly around her, speak gently, never raise his voice. He wanted her to feel safe with him. Gradually, he saw her begin to relax. She smiled more often. She laughed at Hank's terrible jokes. She started singing softly while she worked in the kitchen. One evening, about 3 weeks after their marriage, Quinn came in from a late check on the cattle to find Lydia sitting on the porch in the twilight. She looked up as he approached. "Hank went to bed early," she said. "I wanted to enjoy the cool air." "May I join you?" Quinn asked. She nodded, and he sat in the other chair, careful to leave space between them. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Quinn," Lydia said finally, "can I ask you something? Anything? Why did you never marry before? You are what, 28? Most men out here marry young." He considered how much to tell her. "There was someone once, Sarah. She wanted things I could not give her, a house in town, a easier life. She chose someone else. That must have hurt. At the time, yes. Now I think we both made the right choice. We wanted different things." "What do you want?" Lydia asked softly. Quinn looked at her profile in the starlight and thought about all the true answers he could give. "You, a real marriage, a chance to make you happy." But he said, "I want the ranch to succeed. I want to build something that lasts." That is all. There was something in her voice, a question beneath the question, but he could not read it in the darkness. "That is enough for now," he said carefully. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want you to know this arrangement, this marriage, it is more than I hoped for. You have been respectful and kind. I am grateful, grateful." It was not the word he wanted to hear, but it was what he had agreed to. "I am glad you feel comfortable here." "I do," she said. "More comfortable than I have felt in years. You make me feel safe, Quinn." "That matters more than you might know." He wanted to reach out and take her hand, to tell her she would always be safe with him, that he would spend his life protecting her. Instead, he said, "You are my wife. Your well-being is my responsibility." She turned to look at him fully then, and even in the dim light he could see something unreadable in her expression. "Is that all I am? A responsibility?" His heart pounded. "What do you want me to say, Lydia?" "I don't know," she whispered. Then she stood abruptly. "I should go to bed." "Good night, Quinn." She was gone before he could respond, leaving him alone in the darkness, wondering what had just happened and what, if anything, it meant. Inside her room, Lydia leaned against the closed door, her heart racing. She had not meant to say that, to reveal the confusion that had been growing in her for weeks. When she agreed to this marriage, she had thought it would be simple. A transaction, papers and legal protection in exchange for water rights. She had expected Quinn Gallagher to be like most men she had known, selfish and demanding, tolerating her only for what she could give him. Instead, she found a man who treated her with respect, who never pushed into her space or made demands, who looked at her sometimes with an expression that made her breath catch, but who never acted on whatever he might be feeling, and she was starting to want him to. The realization terrified her. After 3 years of Herbert's cruelty, she had promised herself never to be vulnerable to a man again. But Quinn was different. In his presence, she felt valued rather than tolerated. When he smiled at her over breakfast, her whole day seemed brighter. When they rode together, she felt a partnership she had never experienced with Herbert. She was falling in love with her husband, and she had no idea if he felt anything beyond duty in return. The next few days were awkward. Lydia caught Quinn watching her several times, but he always looked away quickly. She wanted to bring up their conversation again, but had no idea what to say. The unspoken tension stretched between them like a taut wire. On Saturday, they rode into Fargo for supplies. In the general store, they ran into Timothy from the bank, who was with a pretty blonde girl. "Mr. and Mrs. Gallagher," Timothy said cheerfully. He seemed to have recovered from his disappointment. "This is Miss Sarah Milhouse. Sarah, this is Quinn Gallagher and his wife Lydia." Quinn went very still beside her. Lydia remembered the name Sarah, the woman who had broken his heart. Sarah smiled coolly. "Quinn, how nice to see you. I heard you had married, quite suddenly." "Sarah," Quinn said evenly. "I hope you are well." "Very well, thank you. I am engaged now to James Peterson, the banker from Bismarck." She showed off a ring on her finger. "We will marry in the fall. Congratulations," Quinn said politely. Sarah's eyes moved to Lydia, assessing and dismissive. You must be the widow woman with the homestead. How convenient for Quinn, inheriting land through marriage. Lydia felt anger flash through her. Before she could respond, Quinn's arm went around her waist, pulling her close against his side. My wife is not a convenience, Sarah. She is the best thing that has happened to me. Now if you will excuse us, we have shopping to do. He guided Lydia away, his hand warm and firm on her waist. Her heart was hammering, and not just from anger. I am sorry about that, Quinn said once they were alone in another aisle. Sarah can be spiteful. Is she the one who broke your heart? Lydia asked. She is the one I thought broke it, Quinn said, but I realize now that what I felt for Sarah was nothing compared to. He stopped abruptly, his expression shifting. Never mind. Compared to what? Lydia pressed, her pulse racing. Quinn looked at her for a long moment. Around them the store bustled with Saturday shoppers, but Lydia was aware only of him, of the intensity in his blue eyes. Not here, he said quietly. We should talk, but not here. They finished their shopping in charged silence. On the ride home, Lydia's mind raced with possibilities. Quinn had defended her fiercely to Sarah. He had called her the best thing that had happened to him. And he had started to say something important, before stopping himself. When they reached the ranch, Hank took one look at them and made himself scarce, claiming he needed to check on something in the barn. Quinn helped Lydia down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist. They stood in the yard, facing each other, tension crackling between them. We should put the supplies away, Lydia said, though she did not move. Lydia, Quinn said, his voice rough. I need to tell you something. And I need you to let me finish before you respond, because I do not know if I will have the courage to say it twice. Her throat went dry. All right. When I agreed to this marriage, I thought it was just business, a practical solution to a problem. Then you stepped off that train and I felt like I had been hit by lightning. You were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and I could barely remember my own name. He paused, running a hand through his dark hair in agitation. Lydia stood frozen, afraid to breathe. I told myself it was just attraction, that I could manage it, but every day I fall harder. The way you laugh, your strength and competence, how you sing when you think no one is listening, the way you look at sunrise, everything about you makes me want things I promised myself I would not want. Quinn, she whispered. I know this is not what you agreed to, he continued quickly. I know you wanted safety and security, not a husband who cannot stop thinking about you. I will not push you or demand anything. But after what Sarah said today, I realized I cannot pretend anymore. I love you, Lydia, and if all I can ever have is this arrangement we made, I will accept that. But I needed you to know the truth. He stopped, breathing hard, looking at her with naked vulnerability. Lydia's heart was so full she thought it might burst. Are you finished? He nodded. Good, she said, and stepped forward, reaching up to pull his head down to hers. Their first real kiss was nothing like the brief peck at their wedding. It was deep and desperate and full of weeks of restrained longing. Quinn's arms came around her, pulling her tight against him, and Lydia felt safe and desired and cherished all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinn pressed his forehead to hers. I was hoping you might say something, he said, his voice shaky. Lydia laughed, the sound bright and free. I love you too, you impossible man. I have been falling for you since you defended me to Mrs. Henderson in the store, maybe even before that. I was just too frightened to admit it. Frightened of what? He pulled back to look at her face. Of wanting something again. Of hoping. Herbert taught me that hope was dangerous. But then you showed me every day that not all men are cruel. You made me feel valued and respected. You made me want a real marriage instead of just a paper agreement. You want a real marriage. Quinn asked carefully. With me, yes, she said firmly. If you want that too, want it. He laughed and kissed her again, thorough and deep. Lydia, I have been dying wanting it. From the barn they heard Hank's voice. About time. I was going to lock you two in a room together if this took any longer. They broke apart laughing, and Quinn shouted back, Mind your own business, old man. This is my business. I have been watching you two dance around each other for weeks. Quinn shook his head, grinning. Then he looked back at Lydia, his expression turning serious. Are you sure about this? I do not want you to feel pressured. I am sure, she said, touching his face gently. I want a real marriage with you, Quinn. I want to share your bed and your life and build something together. When? He asked, his voice rough. Tonight, she said softly, his arms tightened around her. Lydia, I am ready, she insisted. I want this, I want you. He kissed her again, slowly and tenderly. Then tonight we start over. No more separate rooms, no more pretending this is just business. No more pretending, she agreed. That evening passed in a blur. Supper tasted like sawdust because neither Quinn nor Lydia could focus on food. Hank kept grinning at them like a fool until Quinn finally told him to stop. I am happy for you both, Hank said sincerely. You deserve this. When darkness fell, Lydia excused herself to her room. Quinn waited on the porch, giving her time. His heart was pounding so hard he felt dizzy. After a while, he went inside and walked slowly to his room. Lydia was there, sitting on his bed, wearing a simple white nightgown. She looked nervous but determined. Hi, she said softly. Hi, Quinn replied, closing the door behind him. You can change your mind. Anytime. I will wait as long as you need. I do not want to wait, she said. I have been waiting my whole life for someone who makes me feel the way you do. He crossed the room and sat beside her, taking her hand. Herbert hurt you. I will never do that. You tell me if something is too much or too fast and we stop. Understood, she nodded, tears shining in her eyes. How did I get so lucky? I am the lucky one, Quinn said and kissed her gently. They took their time that night, learning each other slowly. Quinn was endlessly patient and gentle, and Lydia felt walls she had built around her heart crumble completely. This was what marriage should be, she realized. Partnership and tenderness and genuine care. Afterward, lying wrapped in Quinn's arms, she felt truly safe for the first time in years. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. I love you too, Quinn replied, his arms tightening around her. You are mine now, Lydia, and I am yours. For real this time. For real, she agreed and fell asleep smiling. The next morning, Hank took one look at them at breakfast and laughed out loud. Well, you two look happy. We are, Quinn said, not taking his eyes off Lydia. Does this mean we are celebrating? Hank asked. Celebrating what? Lydia asked, confused. Your real wedding day, Hank said. The day you actually became husband and wife in truth, not just on paper. Lydia blushed but laughed. I suppose it is. The following weeks transformed the ranch into something new. Lydia moved her belongings into Quinn's room. They worked together during the day and fell into bed together at night, never seeming to get enough of each other. The separate, polite strangers, they had been dissolved into a couple deeply in love. They rode out to Lydia's homestead regularly, and Quinn started construction on the shelter for cowboys who would manage the cattle near the creek. Lydia made suggestions that Quinn implemented, recognizing her practical wisdom. You should have been a rancher from the start, he told her one day as they surveyed the work. I am a rancher, she replied. Just took me a while to find the right partner. In town, word spread about the change in their relationship. Mrs. Henderson was scandalized that they seemed genuinely happy, having apparently expected the marriage to be miserable. People thought we married for convenience, Lydia said after one particularly gossipy encounter in the store. We did, Quinn pointed out. We just fell in love anyway. Is that so terrible? Terrible for them, maybe. They like having things to criticize. He pulled her close, ignoring the disapproving stares. I do not care what anyone thinks. I have you. That is all that matters. As summer turned to fall, Quinn's cattle fattened on the grass near Lydia's creek. The drought broke with blessed autumn rains. The combined property operation proved as successful as they had hoped. One evening in October, Lydia asked Quinn to sit with her after supper. I have something to tell you, she said, looking nervous and excited. What is it? Quinn asked, immediately concerned. I am pregnant. For a moment, Quinn could not process the words. Then joy flooded through him so intensely he thought he might burst. He pulled her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. A baby, he said, wonder in his voice. We are having a baby. Are you happy? Lydia asked, though she could clearly see the answer on his face. Happy does not begin to cover it, Quinn said. Lydia, you have given me everything. A real marriage, love, and now a child. I do not deserve you. You deserve all of it, she said firmly. You are the best man I have ever known, Quinn Gallagher. Hank was beside himself with excitement when they told him. I am going to be an uncle, he declared, despite no blood relation to either of them. I will teach that baby to ride and rope. You will teach that baby to spoil, Lydia said, laughing. Through the winter, they prepared for the baby's arrival. Quinn built a cradle by hand, working on it in the evenings. Lydia sewed tiny clothes and blankets. The ranch operated smoothly, with hired men managing the expanded operation while Quinn stayed closer to home as Lydia's pregnancy progressed. In early May of 1884, their son was born on a warm spring morning. The labor was long and difficult, and Quinn paced the house in terror until he heard the baby's first cry. When the midwife finally let him into the room, he found Lydia exhausted but radiant, holding a red-faced infant. Meet your son, she said softly. Quinn touched the tiny hand, amazed at how small it was. He is perfect. What should we name him? Lydia asked. What about Joseph, after my father? Joseph Gallagher, Lydia said, testing the name. I like it, and we can call him Joe. Little Joe proved to be a loud, demanding infant who kept them both exhausted. But Quinn had never been happier. He would wake in the night to find Lydia nursing their son, and his heart would swell with love for both of them. I never imagined this, he told her one night, watching her with the baby. A year ago I was alone, convinced I would stay that way. Now I have everything. We have everything, Lydia corrected. We built this together. As Joe grew into a fat, happy baby, the ranch continued to prosper. The combined water resources and land allowed them to expand the herd. Quinn hired more men, built more structures. Lydia managed the accounts and planning with the same competence she brought to everything. On their first wedding anniversary, Quinn gave Lydia a gold locket. Open it, he said. Inside was a tiny photograph of the three of them, taken by a traveling photographer who had passed through Fargo. Our family, Lydia said, tears in her eyes. Thank you, Quinn. Thank you, he replied, for taking a chance on a stranger, for building this life with me, for loving me. That part was easy, she said, kissing him. You made it very easy to love you. The years passed in happiness they had not thought possible. When Joe was 2, Lydia became pregnant again. Their daughter Mary arrived in 1886, a tiny perfect thing with her mother's copper hair. 2 years later, another son, William, completed their family. Quinn expanded the ranch house, adding more rooms as the family grew. Lydia's homestead cabin became a line camp for the cowboys who worked that section. The two properties operated as one successful whole. Hank stayed on, growing older but no less essential. The children called him Uncle Hank and followed him around, learning ranch work from him. He claimed to be annoyed by their constant chatter, but was clearly delighted. In 1890, when Joe was 6, Mary 4, and William 2, Quinn and Lydia stood on the porch watching their children play in the yard. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Lydia asked. "All the time," Quinn admitted. "If you had chosen differently. If I had been too proud to agree to a paper marriage. We would have missed all of this," she said, leaning against him. "I cannot imagine it," Quinn said. "You and the children, you are my whole world. You are mine," Lydia replied. "Though I admit when I stepped off that train I never expected to find love. I was just looking for safety." "Did you find it?" Quinn asked, though he knew the answer. "I found everything," she said simply. "Safety, love, partnership, family. You gave me a life I did not know was possible." "We gave each other that," Quinn said. "I love you, Lydia. More every day." "I love you too," she said, and kissed him while their children laughed and played in the Dakota sunshine. As the years continued, the Gallagher Ranch became one of the most successful in the territory. When Dakota became a state in 1889, Quinn and Lydia celebrated with their neighbors, proud to be part of the growing community. Their children grew strong and healthy, learning the ranching life from both parents. Joe proved to have his father's way with cattle and his mother's head for business. Mary was fearless on horseback and could outrope boys twice her age. William, the baby, was gentle with animals and spent hours following Hank around, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. In 1895, when Joe was 11, he asked his parents how they met. Quinn and Lydia exchanged glances, and Lydia smiled. "Your father married me for my land," she said teasingly. "That is not true," Quinn protested, pulling her close. "I married you because my lawyer cousin suggested it, but I fell in love with you the moment I saw you." "Tell the truth, Papa," Mary insisted. "How did you really meet?" So Quinn told them the story, about the drought and the desperate need for water, about the telegram from Kansas City, about agreeing to marry a stranger for business reasons. "But then your mother stepped off that train," Quinn said, looking at Lydia with the same wonder he had felt that day. "And my heart stopped. I took one look at her and knew my life would never be the same." "That is so romantic," Mary sighed. "It gets better," Lydia said. "Because your father was so determined to be proper and respectful, he nearly drove me crazy. He had separate rooms for us. He treated me like a business partner. I was falling in love with him, and I had no idea if he felt the same." "What changed?" Joe asked, fascinated. "We ran into a woman in town who had broken your father's heart," Lydia said. "She was cruel to me, and your father defended me. He said I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. That is when I knew he felt the same way I did." "And you kissed," Mary guessed. "And we kissed," Quinn confirmed, making all three children giggle. "The point is," Lydia said seriously, "sometimes the best things in life come from unexpected places. Your father and I started as strangers making a practical arrangement, but we chose to build something real. We chose love." "Every single day," Quinn added. "We choose each other every single day." It was a lesson their children carried with them as they grew. Joe eventually married the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a marriage that started with genuine affection and grew into deep love. Mary surprised everyone by falling for a lawyer from Bismarck, marrying for love, despite Quinn's teasing that she had picked a city man. William took over management of the original homestead, living in a new house he built near Lydia's old cabin, running that section of the ranch with his father's skill and his mother's intelligence. Quinn and Lydia grew older together, their love deepening with every passing year. In 1900, when Quinn was 45 and Lydia 42, they celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary. "17 years since you married me for my land," Lydia teased, her copper hair now threaded with silver. "Best business decision I ever made," Quinn replied, pulling her into his arms. though calling it business was always a lie. I loved you from the first moment, even if I did not admit it right away." "I know," she said, touching his face. The lines there were deeper now, marked by years of sun and wind and laughter. "I have always known." They stood on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the Dakota sky in shades of orange and gold. In the distance, cattle grazed on land that bore both their names. In the house behind them, the sounds of family, 3 grown children and their partners gathered for the anniversary celebration. "You have any regrets?" Quinn asked softly. "Not a single one," Lydia said firmly. "You gave me everything I needed. Love, safety, family, partnership. You showed me what marriage should be." "You saved me too," Quinn said. "I was alone, convinced I would always be alone. Then you arrived and filled my life with light." "We saved each other," Lydia said, and kissed him as the sun set on another perfect day. As the new century progressed, Quinn and Lydia eventually stepped back from daily ranch management, letting their children take over operations. They had built something lasting, a successful ranch that would support the family for generations. In their later years, they spent their time together, taking slow rides across land they had made productive through cooperation and love. They sat on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching their grandchildren play in the same yard where their own children had grown up. "Tell us the story again, Grandma," one of the grandchildren would beg. "About how you and Grandpa met." And Lydia would tell it again, the story of a woman alone and desperate and a man who needed land. She would tell how they married as strangers, how they fell in love despite themselves, how they chose each other every day and built a life better than either had dared to dream. "The lesson," Quinn would always add at the end, "is that sometimes the best things come in unexpected packages." Your grandmother arrived as a solution to a problem. She became the answer to everything I did not know I needed. "And your grandfather gave me a real home," Lydia would say. "Not just a house, but a place where I was valued and loved. He taught me that I deserved happiness." They grew old together, never losing the love that had surprised them both. When Quinn was 70 and Lydia 67, they celebrated their 42nd anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. 42 years, Lydia marveled. "It seems like yesterday that I stepped off that train." "Best day of my life," Quinn said, his hand finding hers automatically. His hair was white now, his movements slower, but his eyes still lit up when he looked at her. "Mine too," Lydia agreed. Her copper hair had gone silver, and her face showed the marks of a life well lived. "Everything good in my life started that day." They sat together on the porch they had shared for over 4 decades, watching the sun set over land they had built together. 3 children, 9 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren made up their legacy. But the greatest legacy was the love they had built from a paper arrangement, a love that had only grown stronger with time. "I love you," Quinn said softly, words he had spoken thousands of times but which never grew old. "I love you too," Lydia replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Always and forever." And there on the porch, with the Dakota sunset painting the sky in brilliant colors, Quinn and Lydia Gallagher sat in the contented silence of 2 people who had found in each other everything they had been searching for. They had started as strangers brought together by necessity, marrying for land and water rights. But they had built a love story that would be told and retold by their descendants for generations. A marriage that began as business had become the truest love either had ever known. And every day, from that moment on the train platform when Quinn's heart stopped at the sight of her, until their final days together in the home they had built, they chose each other. They chose love. They chose partnership. They chose, again and again, the best decision either of them ever made, to take a chance on a stranger and build something real together. In the end, that choice made all the difference, transforming two lonely people into a family, a struggling ranch into a thriving legacy, and a paper marriage into a love story for the ages.